Wow, look at everybody who is piling into the session. Good morning, everybody. Good morning, good morning. It's Norm Chan from SentinelOne. Welcome to my session. I'll keep an eye on the number of attendees who are filing in, and when we get to a magical number that I have in my head, then we'll get the show on the road. Hopefully, everybody has access to the chat session or the Q&A. It's where you can put your questions. Any questions that come up, you can either put them into the chat or the Q&A. Oh, look, people are using the chat. Yeah, what is the magical number in my head? I'm going to roll a dice. Okay, I'm going to roll like a Dungeons and Dragon dice to get that magical number. Hey, look at some very familiar faces. Well, you know, I can't see your face. You can see my face, but I cannot see yours. Yeah, let's roll for initiative. Gosh, isn't this weird to be doing this remotely, because I really actually love attending the WCISC show in Winnipeg, and it's unfortunate that we couldn't have it last year, but I'm really glad that we're able to do it this year virtually. If anybody from ISACA or from any of the organizers of the show are in the audience, I just want to say that I think you guys have done a really good job, you guys and gals. I like the platform. I like the way that the live sessions have been set up. Yeah, weird is an understatement. Nothing like sitting at your desk and chatting with people as they come into the virtual booth. Teo is in the house. Good morning, Teo. I'll call you out. Oh, so many familiar names. Really happy to see all these people attending. Okay, you know what? I think we're gonna hit that magic number. Plus, we're almost 5 after, and let's get the show on the road. Let's do this here. Okay, I'm going to minimize the chat. Otherwise, it takes up some of my real estate, and I will try to come back to the chat as sort of at the midpoint and when I pause to look for questions. Oh, and there's stuff in the Q&A as well. Okay. Questions in the Q&A. I'll come back to this stuff shortly. Okay, here we go. Good morning, everybody. Again, it's Norm Chan. I am the pre-sales SE for SentinelOne in Western Canada, and I'm based out of Vancouver. I wish this session could be live, but we're going to do this remote this time of year, or this year. I'm going to bet that we're going to be live next year. So today, I've got you for about 50 minutes. And I'm really excited to go through some material specifically on MITRE's attack evaluations that they did for 2021. So let's go ahead and flip over to the agenda. So I'm going to talk about what attack is. I would expect that most people in this audience are going to know what the MITRE attack framework is, but every once in a while, you know, I think we've heard about MITRE attack, but we haven't spent a lot of time looking into it and sort of what it is. So I'm going to level set. We're going to talk about who MITRE Ingenuity is and what attack is. I'm going to talk about why it matters. I think as cybersecurity professionals, it's important that we have a good grasp on what the MITRE attack framework is, and especially what they've done with their yearly evaluations. We'll talk about how the testing is conducted. We'll talk about the scoring, and then we're going to go directly to MITRE's. Website. And the reason that I like to do that when I talk about the MITRE scoring and the MITRE testing is there's a funny thing that happens every time MITRE performs their evaluations. The last 3 times that they've done this is they don't perform any analysis on the data, right? They conduct the testing and they publish the results of the data, and they sort of leave it to the audience. They leave it to us as cybersecurity professionals to decipher and determine what is important to us. So us as vendors, and then to yourselves as consumers of the technology. So what eventually happens is everybody's marketing department, all the vendors on the planet, their marketing departments go into overdrive, and everyone seems to declare themselves as tops in MITRE in some way, shape, or form. They're, so I try to steer clear of the marketing fluff. I will do my best to stay away from SentinelOne's marketing fluff. I just want to show you the data. I want to show you how to navigate it, because I think it's somewhat difficult to navigate when MITRE publishes this stuff. So that's really the crux, the meat of today's session is after this session, my hope and goal is that you're going to be able to go to MITRE's site, and you're going to be able to navigate and find the data that's going to be most important to your organization, especially at this point in time where I think the move to a next generation type technology for most organizations, it's so ridiculously important, because we have factors such as work from home. Everybody is working from home these days, and trying to manage a distributed endpoint, right, where you have thousands of workers that are working from home, managing the endpoint protection on those endpoints is pretty difficult to do in the face of legacy technologies that we've seen in the past. Getting the visibility onto those endpoints is super important these days. So if you're looking at migrating to next generation technology, I think the MITRE results are a really good place for you to be starting. So here we go. Let's get past the agenda. Let's just talk about MITRE Corporation, and specifically MITRE Ingenuity for a little bit in the MITRE framework. So MITRE Corporation, who are they? US-based nonprofit, and they're actually charged with doing a number of important areas of R&D with the public spend money from the US government. There is an offshoot of MITRE Corporation, specifically MITRE Ingenuity. And they're tasked with doing a number of things security related in healthcare and in cyber. And more importantly, they've been tasked with kind of being the stewards for the MITRE ATT&CK framework. So what is the MITRE ATT&CK framework? Well, it's a mid-level cyber, as you can see in the slide. It's a mid-level cyber adversary model, and what it describes, I think of it as it's kind of like a knowledge base, or it's a wiki, it's a Wikipedia of all of the different tactics and techniques, all the methods that our cyber adversaries are trying to use to get access to our data, what they're using to try to hack and attack into enterprises of all shapes and sizes. Now, another point that I want to make about MITRE Ingenuity is they are independent. They're ridiculously independent. It's nonpartisan, and it's open testing. It's free. It's quote unquote free. You don't have to subscribe to MITRE to get access to this data. You can go to the URLs that I'm going to show you after the fact, or even during the session, and start clicking through it. And they're just really transparent in terms of how they do their testing. So. Now, the MITRE ATT&CK framework. So again, my apologies for those who already know what this is, but I just want to level set for everyone, so I don't mean to patronize. But this is an example of the MITRE ATT&CK framework. Specifically, this uses something that they call their attack navigator, and it's picking out specific things that were tested for this particular round of testing. But if I was to describe the MITRE ATT&CK framework, again, I said it's a little bit like a wiki. It's like a database of all the different methods and mechanisms that attackers use. ATT&CK it's an acronym, and it stands for Attacker, Tactics and Techniques, and Common Knowledge. So again, common knowledge, I think of it as a bit of a database. But the tactics and techniques, what does that really mean? So when you take a look at this screenshot for the attack matrix for enterprise, you see across the top, right, is you see atop the headings of the columns. These are tactics, right? So these are high-level objectives that an attacker or a threat adversary is trying to achieve as they are trying to exfiltrate data as they're trying to attack your enterprise. So examples of that you can see in the matrix are, persistence, or execution. Okay, so when you scroll down, or initial access, okay, as an example of a high-level objective, right, that they are trying to achieve as they are attacking you. Now, underneath each of the tactics is our list of techniques, the known techniques at the time that this matrix was developed. Now, this is a living, breathing document, if you will. So as new techniques, novel techniques are being discovered, then MITRE adds them to their attack matrices. So an example of a technique, I know the font is a little bit small, okay, but example of a technique to achieve initial access would be a common drive-by, right? You hit up a website that is weaponized to leverage a vulnerability in your browser, that's a drive-by. And phishing and spear phishing, those are other examples of techniques that can be used to achieve initial access. So why is attack? Why do I think it's important? Why do I think it's important for people in the cyber community to know of this and to know how it should be used? Well, on this slide, I want to give credit where credit is due. This is not a Norm Chan slide. I wish I could take credit for it. It's not a SentinelOne slide either, but it was developed by someone named David Bianco. And for many of you who have attended SANS training and who have been fortunate enough to attend SANS training done by Mr. Bianco, he has come up with something that he has called his pyramid of pain. And when we talk about pain, we're talking about how much pain we can inflict upon our attackers who are trying to attack our enterprises. So aside from being a SANS instructor, he's also a cybersecurity practitioner for a pretty large retailer in the U.S. So he came up with this way back in 2013, and I think it's still relevant here in 2021. So the notion is this, that us as defenders against the attackers, we really want to inflict as much pain as we possibly can on our attackers. And the hope and the goal is if it's painful enough for our attackers that they're just going to go elsewhere and look for an easier target. So the amount of pain that we can inflict is often directly proportional to the kinds of tooling that we have in our arsenal to inflict that pain. So when we take a look at the kinds of tools, the kinds of defensive measures that we put in place as enterprise security practitioners, if those tools, right, when we look at the pyramid, if those tools are relying on, say, hash values to detect the attacker, well, that's not a lot of pain that you're inflicting, right? Because, if we're using whatever legacy endpoint technology that is solely reliant on signatures, that's not a lot of pain that you're inflicting on the attacker, because we all know it's trivial to change the hash values on a piece of malware. If we are relying on IP address filtering, again, trivial. Attackers can go out and come at you through Tor, or attack you through a proxy. There's just many different ways that they can hide and obfuscate themselves. As you go higher up in this pyramid, you begin to inflict more pain. You begin to make it more difficult for the attackers to attack you. If the attackers are used to using a certain set of tooling, they love to use Empire, they love to use a particular attacking platform, and you are able to detect that platform and protect against it, then that's pretty difficult, because most attackers, they get used to and very comfortable using specific platforms and tooling. When you get to the tip of the pyramid, right? When you get to tactics and techniques and procedures, then that's very difficult for the attacker to deviate from. When the attacker is executing lateral movement, when the attacker is executing process injection, if you can detect those kinds of behaviors, those kinds of activities, and protect against them, you're in a much stronger spot. And this is really where MITRE ATT&CK lives. It's all about defining these tactics, techniques, and procedures. And really, where we are at in technology is the hope is with next generation endpoint technologies, such as EPP platforms and EDR, that we can detect and protect against these. That's why I think MITRE ATT&CK is important. It's still important to be able to detect malware and do malware testing, but detection of TTPs, I think, is very, very important. Okie dokie. So let's talk about this evaluation that MITRE has been doing for about 3 years in a row. What is the MITRE ATT&CK evaluations? So each year they pick a threat actor. So actually, this year you get a 2-for-1 because they picked 2 threat actors this year. They picked Carbonac and Fin7 threat actors, and they do testing over 3 days. And they did it in the fall of 2020, and the results were published in April. So this stuff is relatively hot off the presses. Okay, across the 3 days of testing, they have on the test range that they're doing the testing on. This year they had Windows machines as well as Linux. It's the first time that they did multi-platform testing. And then what they do is they emulate the known tactics, techniques, and procedures that the threat actors have been seen to do in the wild. And then they run those TTPs on the test range. So this year, in other words, when we talk about the attack evaluations or the Carbonac Fin7 emulation, what that means is they're emulating what the Carbonac and Fin7 threat actors are known to do. And then they invite in all the vendors who wish to participate come in. And this year there was like 30 vendors. I would suggest to you it's the who's who of EPP or endpoint protection and EDR that have been tested. So they run 20 major stages, right? So each of the stages corresponds to, most often it's a MITRE tactic, so initial access and then execution. And then inside of each of the stages, there's a number of sub-steps. So there is 20 stages, 20 major stages, which is composed of 174 individual steps. So and also this year, they also tested the protection capabilities of the product as well. But you have to imagine, when they're doing this testing, the products need to be set into a detection mode, right? Because for most of the products, if they're set in a protection mode, they can't test, right? Because most products, the hope is they're going to stop the attack, and then you can't measure their effectiveness at detecting the stages of the attacks. Okay, what else do I want to tell you before I get to the actual results? Let's talk about the threat acting groups. I mentioned that it's Carbonac and Fin7. So you can see, if you have a magnifying glass, that Carbonac is known to mostly target banks, and you can see that Fin7 known to target U.S. retail, restaurant, and hospitality. Okay. Let's talk about this before we get to the actual results. So imagine, if you will. So you have to understand how this stuff is scored. Okay. So I said there was 174 steps that were executed. So when MITRE runs a step, and I'll show you an example of a step when I get to the website in a second. The hope is that the products that are being tested, that they're going to notice. Okay. The hope is that you run a particular step, such as the opening of a Word document or a rich text formatted document. In fact, that is the very first step. When that step is executed, the product notices. And when it notices, at the very least, you hope that it will register telemetry, right? That the product that's being tested is going to say, yeah, we see this file being opened. If it does not register, then that would be considered a miss, right? Kind of straightforward. So you hope to, at very least, table stakes, you hope that you're going to get telemetry. Now, beyond that, if the product is able to do any of the other three, Okay, meaning if the product was able to say, look, we saw that this, this Word document was opened. If you can put up like a general alert that's, potentially to say, identify that this was potentially something bad, it was suspicious, that might be a good thing. If you're able to say, look, this looks like a particular MITRE tactic, like potentially why that document was open, hey, this looks like it's initial access. And ideally, if you can say, this looks like a specific MITRE technique, this looks like spear phishing, this looks like a drive-by compromise, even better. Okay, so there is richer information if you're able to perform what MITRE calls an analytic detection. So an analytic detection is if it's any one of a general tactic or technique versus just the raw telemetry. Okay. Two more things before we get to the actual data that you need to know as you're looking at the data for MITRE. Let's pretend for a moment that the product that's being tested, that MITRE runs a step, and when they run that step, that it scores a miss in one of these detection categories. It didn't detect telemetry, or it didn't come up with a tactic or technique analytic detection. If that happens, what MITRE allows is the vendor to go back and perform a configuration change on the product. So, and MITRE makes a note when that happens, right? So, if you didn't score telemetry, you didn't score an analytic detection, you get to go back as a vendor and make a configuration change. And sometimes the configuration changes, they're relatively benign. Maybe you didn't have enough fields in your UI to show some Mondo large PowerShell script, right? You can go back and make that change. I need to expand the fields in my UI. Sometimes if you flat out missed it and you need to make a logic change, right? I need to go back and I need to just, I need to tell the product how to detect what it is that I just missed. MITRE allows for that, but they make a notation. Okay, so that's something to keep aware of, because as we know, when attackers attack us, they let you go back and adjust your product. I'm just kidding. Of course they don't. But nonetheless, MITRE does. Okay. You can also have a delayed modifier as well. Perhaps if the product that's being tested is has latent response, maybe because it has to correlate rules across a SIM, or maybe the sample there was a malware sample and that gets dropped into a sandbox, right? And the sandbox has to chug away with it. Then it can be a delay. That also gets recorded. Okay, here we go. So I'm just going to pause. I'm going to pull up my chat for a sec. I'm just going to look for 92 participants. Thanks for tuning into my session. I'm going to check the chat real quick to see if there's anything there. Okay, 1 second. Okay, nothing there. Oh, let's check the Q&A really quick from the anonymous attendee. Okay, anonymous attendee asks, how lightweight is your sensor compared to the competition, such as CrowdStrike, Falcon, or Carbon Black? How lightweight? Okay, sure, why not? Let's talk about that. So my sensor has really low impact on endpoints. When I compare to the likes of CrowdStrike and Carbon Black, I have low impact for a couple of reasons. Number one, I'm not scan-based. I'm not scan-centric. I don't use signatures. I'm not particularly reliant on going out to the cloud to do conviction. So it's comparable. Like it's light compared to my competitors. And also another question from anonymous attendee. Also, how suitable is your solution in expunging VDI devices that have been decommissioned from the SentinelOne console? Okay, great question. So let me expand on that just a smidge. So imagine, if you will, in a virtual desktop scenario, that you're running my agent, and again, let's pretend for a moment that those VDI sessions are non-persistent, right? So the VDI systems come up, the SentinelOne agent does its thing, it comes up and it registers itself into the console. At the end of the day, when that VDI session goes away, it'd be really annoying if you were left with all these, these ghost entries in the console. So how good are we at expunging that? We do great. So what you do is you set up a dedicated grouping inside the console, and you set the expiry time for that group of agents to be very, very small, right? So if they don't check in 24, 48, whatever the lifespan of your VDI systems are, then they can get aged out of the console, right? So you're not left with hundreds or thousands of these annoying VDI sessions. Okay, I'm going to close the Q&A. I'm just going to check chat one more time before I get to the actual data. Okay, nothing in chat, nothing coming in on Q&A. Let's do this. Let's head straight over to the MITRE website. Okay. You know what I'm going to do to make this just a little bit interesting, and for those who are paying attention, I want to reward those who are paying attention, is after this session ends, okay, after this session ends, I will send a prize. I do not know what prize it's going to be. It's probably going to be a gift card or something like that, Amazon or a Skip the Dishes gift card. But I will send a prize to the first 5 people, okay, after the session ends, who will show me a screenshot from MITRE showing the SentinelOne results. All right. So specifically, let's say our number of, I'll make it really tough. No, I'll make it really easy. Show me a screenshot of SentinelOne's analytic detections at the end, right? So if don't get it now and send it to me. I'll look for the timestamp of your emails after the end of the session, and the first 5 people, I'll send you some kind of a prize. All right. So let's look at the results. So here we are on the actual MITRE page. This goes straight to to MITRE's results page. And here, again, this is the Carbonac and Fin7 testing that was released in April. If you wanted to look at the older results, they're here as well, right? So you can take a look at when they tested us against the APT29 threat actor, and then the APT3 threat actor back in 2018. Wizard Spider and Sandworm, that's slated for testing this fall, and we expect to see those results in the spring of 2022. So who knows? Maybe I'll talk about Wizard Spider and Sandworm at next year's WCISC. So when you scroll down from this page, you get to see all of the different vendors that were tested. And like I said, there was 30 vendors this year that came to participate. I don't know. I think it's the who's who of endpoint protection and EDR type technologies. So maybe what I'll do, just for fun, is I'm going to go back to my chat, and I want the folks who are here, who are listening live, to take a look and at this list of vendors, and whose results should we bring up? I know everyone's muted. I'm sure you guys are all shouting out at the same time. Okay, so let's. I'm seeing a few come up here. Oh, holy moly! Everyone's coming up. Okay, we're going to bring up 30 tabs with everybody. Now, okay, I'm going to pick a few from the list here. We got Fortinet. We got Checkpoint. We got holy. Okay. I'm just going to cherry pick. Thank you very much for everyone for chiming in. So let's bring up CrowdStrike is on that list as well. Okay, let's bring up CrowdStrike. Okay, and let's bring up Checkpoint, and we'll bring up one more. Let me just go back to that list again. Hang on a second. Chat. Palo Alto. Sure, let's bring up Palo Alto. That's fun. Okay. Let's close the chat down, get my real estate back. Where is Palo Alto? Alphabetical order, LMNOP, P, Palo Alto. All right. And, I should probably bring up my own results, too, just for fun. So here we go. We'll bring up SentinelOne's. So I got 4 tabs happening here. So I've got CrowdStrike's results here. I've got Checkpoint's results here, SentinelOne's here, and then I have 2 additional tabs that I just want to draw your attention to, because there's lots of useful and cool free tools that MITRE makes available for you on their site. So this tool here, this is their technique comparison tool. Okay, so that is available here, right? This is the technique comparison tool. So what I like about the technique comparison tool is when I talk about 174 steps, they document for you all 174 steps. So if you want to know, what specifically was run, what were the steps of the attacks? Sorry, what were the steps across the major phases of the attack? It's all here, right? All here for you. So again, the first, as an example, let's take a look at step 1A1. Okay, 1A1. The first step is, look, Explorer starts Word, and Word, the user opens this rich text formatted document. So that's an example of the step. So again, when this is run, you would hope that the products that are being tested can at least register telemetry, right? So let's just take a look at how we dissect. Oh, sorry, and the other tool, the other free tool that I think is kind of handy is the participant comparison tool, right? So I have that one opened up here. And why it's useful is it allows you to compare 2 participants, and what you can do is you can filter it by show me where 2 products are similar, right? So where they had detections, matched steps, where they were similar in terms of what they're able to detect. And then you can also filter it by show me where they're different, right? So show me where the 2 products that perhaps you're thinking of acquiring or investing in are different. So that's a super handy free tool as well. So let's look at some results here. So let's start with CrowdStrike on the first tab. So this is the way that I like to go through this, and there's a number of different ways to do it, but this is how I like to do it. Is I jump down here over to the results graph, or the results graph, because there's a couple. And remember how I talked about that as the steps are run, you can score telemetry, right, or general tactics or techniques. And then if you've missed, then you come back here and it comes up as a missed detection. Well, all of these on their graphs, all these sections, they're dynamic. So you can start filtering out, right? So if you want to say, ask the question, where did CrowdStrike miss, right? Where was CrowdStrike weak, right? Then you can filter out all of their detections, and then it shows you, right? This is where they're weak. And you can do the arithmetic, and you can start, they missed 4 times here, and they missed 1 time here, and a couple times here on the Carbonac scenario, then a couple more times over here on the Thin7 scenario. And you can do the same thing for any of the other vendors. So here's Checkpoint. This is the first year that their Harmony client was tested, right? And let's take a look, and you can start to filter out telemetry, filter out the general detections, tactics, and techniques. And I don't know. I think if I was to eyeball Checkpoint versus CrowdStrike, what do you think? Looks like, looking at the scale on the left-hand side, right? Because it's the same scale, basically. It kind of looks like Checkpoint detected less, or sorry, Checkpoint missed less versus CrowdStrike. And then let's, of course, do the same thing for Palo Alto, right? Just to look at it visually, right? Because we're all visual creatures, That looks even better, I would say, right? So if I had to stack rank between, CrowdStrike in terms of misses and Checkpoint and Palo Alto, I'd say Palo Alto did really, really well, between those 3. If I had to add us to the mix, and I begin to do the filtering, so filter out my telemetry, my general, my tactics, and my techniques, that is where SentinelOne missed, right? So we didn't. Okay, so I don't want to not making a judgment. Okay, but this is what the data shows. So across all 174 steps, we didn't miss a beat in this round of testing. So what else can we take a look at in terms of the data? You can start to scroll down into the next section, and inside the next section is where you can start to take a look at, again, looking at the color coding, the non-detections, right, the misses. You can start to look at, for example, where those misses occurred and what steps specifically. You know, so let's take a look at, I don't know, let's just pick on one just for fun. Let's take a look at 5A3, 5A8. Let's go to 5A8. Okay, so if you wanted to know what did CrowdStrike miss on 5A8, okay, I come back to the technique comparison tool, go to 5A8, okay, and let's add them here. Let's add a vendor. We'll select CrowdStrike, ABC. We'll select SentinelOne, and we'll select the other ones as well. SentinelOne, and we will also select, what did we say, Checkpoint? Whoops. Checkpoint, and who else do I have on there? Palo Alto, Elemento, PP. Here we go. Okay, so this is an example, right? So across the, just all the folks that I have up on here, on step 5A8. So what is 5A8? So the user, kmitnick, tricky, logs onto a bank file server from this IP, right? So you can see that CrowdStrike missed, Checkpoint missed, Palo Alto missed. We scored a telemetry detection, and we also scored a technique detection. If you drill into this on the little footnotes here, you can click into it, and it shows you a screenshot from our UI, or if the product in question scored a detection, it would show there. And then we also scored a technique, so come over here, and then it shows you what it looks like inside of our UI. Now, what else did I mention in terms of the evaluations? Oh yeah, sorry. If I scroll back up to the top, oh, we didn't even go to Palo Alto. Sorry, folks. No, that's me. This is Palo Alto. Right? They had a really good low miscount. You can actually see the numbers over here on the right. Okay, so on this particular row, okay, you have the numeric values of the detections. Okay, so for the Carbonac and Fin7 testing, and on this column, visibility. Well, so what is visibility? Visibility is the number of sub-steps, right, where there's either an analytic, a telemetry. So an analytic detection, right, you may recall an analytic detection is something that's either general, tactic, or technique. And then telemetry, well, telemetry is just, right, it's noticing that it happened. So Palo Alto did really well, right, 169 out of 174. So they missed like 5 times. Okay, and then Checkpoint, right, missing a little bit more, and then when we go back to CrowdStrike, they missed more still. 2 other things that I want to point out before I get to some Q&A is let's talk about the configuration changes, right? So I mentioned that, you know, if a particular step is run, what MITRE allows you to do is come back to make a configuration change in your product if you decided, or if you missed. So one way to figure out how many config changes were made, because there's no tally of it in the results here, is you can click on the actual link here, and it takes you to kind of a summary, scrollable summary of all the steps, right? All 174 steps, right? So scenario 1, scenario 2. So you may recall scenario 1 is Carbonac, scenario 2 is the Fin7 testing. And here, there's 2 interesting points here. One is they tell you when a configuration change was made, okay? And then also, if Linux is important to you in any way, shape, or form, because I did mention that this is the first year they tested Linux aside from Windows, if you scroll down, you can find the little happy penguin. It happens around 5A8. Actually, it happens around where CrowdStrike started missing. Yeah, here we go. 5A8, and then, yeah, 5A7, actually. So there's actually 12 specific substeps that involve Linux. And so if you looked at this, you could see, for example, 5A7, they scored telemetry, but they had to make a config change. They missed on 5A8. They only scored telemetry. They've got a technique here, but they did that after a config change. And then they missed on that one, telemetry only, missed on that one. So if Linux is important to you, the sub-steps starting around 5A7, 5A8 is a good place to look. And then just for fun, what I like to do is I just do a control find, and I say config, if I can type, configuration change 13 times, okay? And if I was to go and scroll through it and say, well, show me the configuration changes that CrowdStrike made. So that was, hang on, put that into the buffer. So that's like config change. And you can see, look, it's a detection logic change. Data source change, right? Config change, right? And then we can do that for, how many did, oh, okay, well, of course I know. So for checkpoint, if we do the same thing, right? Yeah, 32 times. What was CrowdStrike again? 13? 13 times. Okay, so, and so for checkpoint, for Harmony, right, they had 32 configuration changes on the Carbonac scenario. I think it's like another 10 or so on the FIN7. Some of them are not logic changes. You can see some of them are data source changes. They had to look elsewhere potentially for the to register these detections. And Palo Alto, do a quick look-see here. Palo Alto, wait for the page to render, Control F, configuration changes. Look at that, 0. Hats off to Palo Alto. So no config changes there. And for SentinelOne, do the same thing. And we will do, as soon as my page loads, we also had 0, right? So SentinelOne didn't miss, or sorry, we didn't have to make any configuration changes either. 2 more things. Okay, I keep adding things I want to tell you. The configuration. I like looking at the configuration. So in other words, what did vendors have to bring, right? So when we take a look at, say, let's take a look at, I'm running tight on time here. Let's take a look at Checkpoint or Palo Alto. So Palo Alto, they brought their XDR client. They brought, so Cortex server, their agent, and they brought a firewall. What did other vendors bring, right? So when I take a look at Checkpoint, what did Checkpoint bring? I click on here, vendor configuration. They brought their agent, and they brought their management, which is awesome, which is comparable to what SentinelOne brought. In our configuration, we just bring our agent. And what did CrowdStrike bring? CrowdStrike, scroll to the top, go back. CrowdStrike, right, they have to bring, right, they brought the Falcon agent, Linux agent, Falcon Prevent, Falcon X, device control, firewall management, Insight, Overwatch, and they brought Discover. I'm going to pause again, plus because I'm getting tight on time, I want to just check the QA a moment. I'm going to check for some chat as well. Let's start with the chat. If you have any questions, okay, let's scroll. Oh shoot! Please show BlackBerry. Look, ladies and gentlemen, if there's it's difficult for me to go over every vendor stuff. What I'm hoping is that you have enough information that you can go to the MITRE site and start looking at the data with a bit of a critical eye. Okay, don't look at a vendor's marketing slides. Look at what they detected. Let's look at their configuration. Let's look at if they had to make configuration changes, how they do in Linux. let's take a look at how they protected. I didn't even get to that, right? Because the protection scores, by the way, were optional this year. So when we take a look at, say, Checkpoint, and take a look at what they, so Checkpoint chose not to publish their protection testing. I'm pretty sure CrowdStrike did publish their protection testing. Come over here, and you go to protections. Yes, they did, right? CrowdStrike, I think, missed on step 5, 14, and 15, so they missed 3 out of 10. And SentinelOne on my protection testing. Let me just double check this. I come to here. Sorry, folks, I'm going a little fast. And I go to protections. We missed on step 5, right? So we were 9 out of 10. CrowdStrike 7 out of 10. Checkpoint didn't publish. Okay, look, if I am happy to walk through this one-on-one with anybody. Okay, so send me an email, what is my email address? It's normc@sentinelone.com. Normc, N-O-R-M-C @sentinelone.com. The first 5 people who show me a screenshot of SentinelOne's results, I'll send you a prize. And if you'd like a session, I'm happy to do this one-on-one with anybody to walk through this at a bit of a more leisurely pace. I'm going to check the Q&A again. Thank you. What else do we have here? Oh, lots of thank yous. Okay, thank you everybody very much. I'm going to call it a wrap. Thank you everybody for joining on to my session today. I really hope to do this live next year. Please connect with me via email. I will send, again, a prize to the first 5 folks who send me that screenshot. And if you would like a one-on-one personalized walkthrough of the data where we can do a little more interaction than just me talking to mute, then happy to do that as well. Okay? Thank you very much, everybody. Let's call this one a wrap.